We're good to go.
All right. Welcome, everyone. We are here. If you are in the right place, you are in the APUS, APU Criminology Club meeting. We have our special guest with us here today from the wonderful podcast called California True Crime. As a California native, I sought out this podcast and I fell in love with them and their authenticity. And I'm a big believer of the answer is always no if you don't ask. And so you all, club members, said you wanted guest speakers and we were doing podcast chats. And I was like, you know what? Hey, maybe they'll want to be on the show. I like their show. Maybe they'll want to come share about it. And you know what they said? They said yes. So here we are. I have Charles, wave for us. And then Jessica, hey girl, and then Sean. And these three, I'm seeing for the first time today. I've been hearing their voices. Ooh, couldn't even tell you how long. I know I started at number 1 and listened all the way through, at least through 2021. So I have heard their voices a lot and I love these guys. So with that, I'm gonna let them tell you more about themselves. I'm gonna go ahead and be quiet. Last time announcing, if you're here for Dr. Bashir's, put your first and last name in the chat. The way this will go is the Cali True Crime cast is gonna share a little bit about their podcast and how they do their stuff. Then we're going to have a little Q&A session, and then we're going to pause and switch into our discussion on clemency. Take it away, friends.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sean. Just to give you a little background, I guess, we are California True Crime. We're a podcast where we focus on true crime in California, and how it started. We were at a Christmas party and we thought, hey, let's start a podcast. And we ended up wanting to do it fully on Zodiac, and that was already taken. So we decided not to, and we just kind of brainstormed into what we are now. And as we started working on different crimes, we really started honing in on the history of the area that we were at and learned a lot. And maybe I'll have someone else keep going and we'll ping pong off of each other and figure out where we go with this.
Charles?
Yeah, this almost never happens to us. Yeah, like Sean said, one of the things that we focused on was we're all true crime fans, and podcast fans. But one thing we noticed, actually, it came up listening to another podcast, not to name names, but that mispronounced a place that we're all really familiar with, and I know as a California native probably knows this, that California is a lot more than just the beaches and Hollywood. So what we were really focused on was, like Sean said, doing research on the communities and the history of the places, and then putting that into a kind of a larger context, as well as, and Jess can talk more about this, but also looking at policy and how a lot of these crimes have affected policy for our state, and then in some cases led the way for the rest of the nation.
Yeah, that was a really big deal to us. I think as Californians, we're always being asked to vote on everything, tons of policies and tons of new laws. And so it was really important to us not just to talk about the cases, but also to talk about the laws that were affected by them, whether they're in the 70s or earlier, laws that people are asking to have changed now, or even policies, local policies of police. Or in our last episode, we talked a lot about clemency, which was our first foray into that. So just trying to say that there's a reason we're covering these cases. They sort of belong to history in a way, and to always be really like mindful of victims as well. I think that's kind of what the three of us focus on most.
We kind of joke a little bit, and with friends and family or other people in our discussion group sometimes, that we are kind of like a Huell Hauser with true crime. If you're not familiar with Huell Hauser, he was a guy on public access that traveled up and down California finding interesting and different places, and then would talk about them for a half hour. And that's also has been really fun for us, is to find out a lot more about a state that we all grew up in, that in some cases didn't know as much as we thought we did. Yeah, we're kind of new at this part, so if you guys have questions going along, feel free to ask them. But one of the kind of cool things about building the podcast too has been the community of creators as well. So that there's a lot of creators that helped us kind of get our start when we started out with a California centric podcast. We thought it was super interesting, hey, it's going to be really kind of very specific, and then found out there are quite a few others out there. One California Dreaming, who has been doing it for a long time and was really supportive, and a few others. One All Crime No Cattle out of Texas, and our friends, even a podcast from Scandinavia actually helped a lot. So that's been kind of a fun journey, as well as getting to know some other creators. We recently joined the Darkcast Network. It's an independent podcast network of other creators kind of in the same vein. A lot of true crime, a bit of conspiracy, which is always kind of fun to listen to. And it's been really, really educational, as well as a fun collaborative atmosphere.
So I don't know if you guys want to talk a little bit about our process. We have cases, I think our earliest one, Charles, you did, goes back to the 1800s. So we're covering cases all throughout time in California, as well as different kind of cases. We're getting to our first arson cases, which are coming up. And the way that we do that is actually the three of us pick our own cases, and we each do our own research. And then we present that to the other two people and our listeners. And each person in each episode does a little bit of history or finding out different things, or if you want to focus on, a sociological aspect, which I like. I have a degree in sociology, so that's something I'm really always kind of focused on in our cases. But each one of us, I think you can kind of tell a little bit about us by the kinds of cases we choose. I always kind of think that that's true. I don't know if that's thinking too much about it, but we use a variety of things. Just this season, we really started to, this is our third season that we're in, contacting victims and contacting police. Charles got to do a really interesting interview with the chief of police in Seaside, California, on a cold case that then just a couple weeks later was solved. And that was really exciting. Do you guys want to talk about how you pick cases?
Sure. I usually just Google search something. I put in some combination of horrible words together, and then it pops up something that I can find, and then I'll start researching it more. And I like how a lot of times when we come together and we talk about the cases, we really, like you were saying, which ones we pick, and then when we go over them together, sometimes we get the episodes are like an hour to an hour and a half, but sometimes we're on Zoom or together for hours arguing or just talking about one little thing, because we all have different opinions about things, and it's really great. So we learn a lot more because then we look up more. And I think the whole process of just figuring out, going over it together first, because you're supposed to in college get someone to proofread everything before you turn it in. And it's the same thing, because you can see how you were either one-sided and you need to open it up, or it was just a horribly written. Like my last one I'm working on right now, Charles and Jessica both, the opening paragraph was like, you need to take this and put it together better. And I'm like, you're right. And which I did. So it helps a lot. But I think the process of just finding different cases, and sometimes after we did Stephen Stainer for so long, it was like, that was a big case. And we started talking about, let's do some mail fraud, because it was just too much of what was going on. There was just, sometimes I started a different podcast called The History of Malls, because I needed something light, and talking about department stores was a lot easier than true crime. So, there's a huge process because it takes a big toll. So sorry, I'll stop talking. Go ahead, Charles.
No, kind of to piggyback on that, is that it's funny, we're in some ways we're all quite a bit alike, but our differences really come out when that first draft gets to the table, or the email, and we have our initial meeting of what'd you guys think, and let's go over it. And then you have a totally different take on something, or see something that we didn't like in my case, I didn't even think about. One of the episodes I wrote, I think last season, was about a trans woman, Gwen Orejo, who was it was a brutal murder, and it was an eye-opening case. And I think that's one, and like Sean talked about the Stephen Stainer case, some of those that deal with a lot of social issues or things that we maybe not necessarily talked about or thought about from a different perspective. And that's been really fun. How we find cases too. I know a lot of our current cases, Sean and I originally, when we got together, Jess came, I think we started the first meeting and Jess joined us in our second meeting. We have the quote unquote crime database that has a list of all of our cases. And I think that lasted for about a month before we started finding other cases that were linked. So we did research and then found out, oh, this is an interesting case. We spent a lot of time in one of our local libraries, spending in their newspaper archives, which is fun, and then came away with reams and reams of paper that were like linking us to other resource or other topics or other cases to research. Also something sometimes in the news or even a historical event, or we'll go somewhere or find a random article about another connection and like, oh, that's interesting, let's look that up. The case Jess talked about that I researched was about the California version of Al Capone, which was a Chinese gangster called Little Pete Ching, and had no clue about him. And that sent us down about other connected crimes that we're actually working on for the next couple of seasons. So it's always fun. The exploration is one of the best parts.
I think also to mention, just if anyone plans on starting a podcast too, I think with the whole process, we started in a studio. I've been a musician for many years, and I had like a little studio. So that's why I was like, let's do this, because we can always record. And then once we got to the editing spot, I think we all agree that it's quite an ordeal. We're not just talking and then saying, yeah, that's a take. We have to edit it because it's a very sensitive topic here and there. So we can't, sometimes we're like laughing about something else and we can't keep that in there. So it's like, and the editing process is hard. I think when I first started, some of these episodes were like, we recorded for 3 hours and it took me 1 hour every 10 minutes to edit it. So it was a lot for the episodes. I got a lot better where I'm like doing this constantly and like cutting and pasting as it goes, and it gets better. And they, Charles and Jessica do their own editing on their side because we're now been doing it on Zoom. I moved a little farther away and I haven't been there that long. But when COVID hit, we were doing everything on Zoom, and that was a hard task at first. But as we sync it up, we have to like yell, we do a countdown together to sync it up. It's a good process, but besides just the research, there's a lot more that goes into it of trying to make it. And then Jessica does all the social media and stuff. So that's even more. So yeah, it's a long process.
And it's been fun because we all have a kind of our own specialties or what we really like to do. I think Sean and I can agree on that nobody researched like Jessica at all. I mean, if you guys don't know, like Jess and I are married, so our house there's stacks of research all over the house. Sean's our sound quality is 100% completely due to Sean and his editing and mastering, and he has made us audio snobs. That's a downfall because now we're starting to listen and picking up stuff that I never would have thought, and the part that I really enjoyed is the writing and the rewriting and the discussion of like this initials. But over time, we've all kind of been able to learn each other's spots or gotten better at it. Jess and I have started learning. Sean's been teaching us the editing and the mastering. Thanks to Jessica, Sean and I's research has gotten better. So that's also been a byproduct that's been a real positive thing to us.
Yeah, it was really just 3 people with a dream, and I'm just kidding. But, yeah.
I do feel really lucky to do this podcast with the two of them, I think, because there are a lot of podcasts on true crime that you can find where there's a lot of speculation or guessing or a lot of conversations around that. And we, especially now that we've moved into our third season, have really tried to move towards more, I think, journalism. And none of us really know how to do that. So we've been talking to people who do. And I know Charles has been researching that a lot. But these two are always really good about, what might get us a lot of listens or views if we said, but it's not backed up by evidence, or it's not, it's just not, doesn't smell right. It's not okay to do. We're always on that same page that we put the victims first. We put, not labeling someone a suspect if we don't have evidence for that. We're not just gonna air random things. We really stick to trying to, the things we can prove, the things that have been reported. And I really appreciate that. And I know that's an ongoing conversation in the true crime community. How do you treat victims and how do you tell these stories? And a lot of the stories get retold and retold over and over again. So I appreciate working with them and having that someone you can speak with and say, is this information go too far? Do people need to hear every detail? What's too much? And I think the three of us have different places where we land on that, but it helps to have them and I going back over it.
We've had some really, and I think that's been the fun thing too, is, I won't say fun because that's sometimes kind of a loaded term with the subject matter, but it has been an education to find out where that line is drawn for if we're writing or researching a topic or talking to people, and how much detail do you put in is too much, and are we putting it in to be lurid, or are we putting it in to be is there a purpose behind it? I know, even I think one of our first season episodes that dealt with a really, really brutal crime of a woman, and I kind of consider myself not very squeamish, and I think Sean and I landed on the side of like, why are you putting that in that much detail? And Jess made an amazing, compelling argument, and we understood. So that's always kind of in the forefront, is how are we doing this? But I also think too, the proof has been for us is getting emails and correspondence from victims that of or people that have been connected to cases, and they have been they have not given us thumbs up, but have commented that the way we handled the material was in line with their thoughts, and that made us happy.
And they get the good ones. I get emails from there was a man on, he's death row, and I get emails from his sister saying I've got it all wrong. So, but they get the nice ones. I get this.
We get the nice ones. It's team effort.
You guys are awesome. I wanted to take a moment just real quick because you guys are like, oh, this part's weird for us. So I wanted to go ahead and also open up the floor to folks if they have questions and stuff, because what I do know is you very often are stuck having a one-way conversation with your listeners. And this also gives you a chance to have a two-way conversation. I might be your only current listener, but I'm sure I won't be your only listener by the end of this.
I have
know
a couple
Eric
of questions lined up already.
Yeah, so we already have some
Alright.
questions for you, and then we do have some attendees. So I wanted to make that announcement to the attendees. You can, if you don't want to come off mute, you can put your question in the chat. If not, if you have a question, if you can use the raise hand feature so that we can call on you when we get to it. And we're going to start with some of the questions that we already did receive. So while Eric is getting those ready, what I want to say, so I don't forget later, is your sound quality. I can attest to, I guess it was Sean, you gave credit, it did improve. And I think I told you all this the other day, but one of the reasons why I stuck with you is your authenticity really comes through, not only in your love for the history of California, but also your dedication to not glorifying the crimes or the killers as we know some shows and things do. You always focus on the victims. And I really, really like the, forgive me for forgetting the name. Gosh, at the very end, you always do like a missing persons update, which I'm not sure if you mentioned that yet, but I really find that to be so sincere. So I almost feel like it's like a community service that you're doing too, because even though I no longer live in California, that is my number one worst fear as a mom, that hands down, I would rather find out my child had died and gone to heaven than find out he was missing. And some people don't understand why I would say that. But every time I hear you list a missing person, I stop and say a prayer for that family, because it is my worst fear. So I just, as not only a mom, but as a fellow human being, I want to thank you, because you don't have to do that. And you highlight one in every single episode, and I think it's important. So thank you for that.
We actually decided to do that when we were covering Carrie Steiner, and we kind of realized that there was so much coverage, and still to this day, you can find articles from somebody daily. And then there were other cases that they were looking at that he may have been a part of or not a part of. But those cases, we couldn't find anything on them. So we wanted a way to, if we're covering a case where there is information and we've been able to tell you that story, but we want to cover a case that there's not a lot of information out there about, to make sure people aren't forgotten.
Also, too, we Jess does an amazing job about covering a lot of the ones that we don't put on episodes on our social media. So even if you don't listen to us, check out our Twitter and our Instagram, because what we've tried to do is a lot of the cases that are coming up that are either missing persons or, unsolved cases that are in the news, where we haven't had a chance to do the research, or it's a way that we can help out without throwing more fuel on the fire of conjecture and speculation that we've seen, or even around California, especially lately with some of the cases that are going on where people are speculating, but they're trying to fill up time. We're not trying to do that. So.
I appreciate that. You have our question, Erica? Go ahead.
Yep. Our first question is going to be, what would you consider the most impactful or surprising thing or fact that you've learned about crime in California, or about podcasting about crime? If that made sense. I can also type it into the chat. Was there something that really struck you as a surprise or unexpected? Was there, I'm sure you've learned a lot of cases that you didn't know about through your research, but any trends or just what stuck out to you?
I think for myself, being very ignorant about a lot of things and learning as I learn, so that I think Charles and Jessica and I have talked about this, about my shock of how California is supposed to be such a progressive state. And sometimes there's these things that are on there, like laws or anything, that just really floor me. Like we've talked about this before, but California technically does not have an age to be married. There's no limit, and you just have to find a parent and one judge supposedly that would do it. Not everyone would. That's like, you have that, which probably stops everything, but you just never know, instead of just having it on the law. And I just find that kind of crazy. And then what was it, Charles, if you could help me, like the whole deed thing? Remember how we used to talk about the deed with the laws of the racist things on deeds?
Yeah, the idea that you had baked in the systemic racism in with house deeds, that houses couldn't be sold to people of color at all, and that they're still on the books, and so kind of piggybacking on what Sean said, that's been an eye-opening too, of there's a lot of stuff that even as natives of California that we never really, you kind of confronted with, this is a lot more complex, and this isn't exactly what people think California is, and it has just as many problems as everywhere else. And that, I think one of the things for me is, like with the legal stuff, is kind of that Gordian knot of how the law has been used to abuse and subjugate so many different people in the last 100 years. And we're not talking like, not pre 1900. It's within the last 50 years. We highlight a lot of that with the laws that went after the LGBTQIA community. especially, and how those were put in place, and we're still seeing ramifications of those today. So that, again, you know, it's intellectually like, yeah, we knew it would go on, but it's another thing to see it in black and white and read stories about the human impact of that, you know, especially considering that we're kind of from Central California. And I'll say somewhat, I mean, I can only speak for myself, somewhat sheltered, where we grew up.
I think for me, basically the same thing that you guys are saying. We always, at first, we would decide to do an older case. I did one in 1906, and you always think, oh, this will be a little more fun. You know, the people aren't alive anymore, and then you start to learn about them, and I take it super personally and get really serious about it. But in that case, just little things I never thought about. The jury, they did their thinking about, you know, I can't think of that word, what the jury does. But they did it in a room with windows, and there are people lined up on the outside who could hear and see them. And that was, to me, that was just crazy to think about. And you know, that system had to evolve from something, but to be able to use someone's murder or case to talk about these issues, which in some ways, you know, still have today with another issue we did, one of your cases, Charles, where the jury talked to the press. So there's, you know, it's kind of this like through line through a lot of history of California, and I assume a lot of places in the United States.
And I think the case, if I remember correctly, the case Jessica's talking about is Emma Ledoux. It's from one of our favorite cases. It's the man in the trunk. She was arrested and convicted of killing her husband. And honestly, that was one where I went in, I'm like, yeah, she's totally guilty, 100%. That we have a museum that has an exhibit to her, and they give tours, and you can see the trunk and stuff. We all know it's fact. And then after 3 episodes of going through it, going, nope, 100%, she's innocent. She was railroaded. But then looking at the problems that a woman dealt with in 1906 for having, it's no different than 2022. And so seeing some of the stuff that we think is things have changed so much in California, they really haven't. You know, we're dealing with the exact same things, which is disheartening quite a bit sometimes. But on that note, though, just a little like shameless plug for the episode in season 1 of Man in the Box. Because of Jessica's episode, the museum actually changed their display or what's on the website. So that was really kind of cool. That was really awesome. And so they went from saying she's definitely guilty to she was convicted. So that was awesome. That's
awesome that you could see the direct impact of what talking about and really researching these cases can do. I have one more question that was submitted earlier, and then then Ree can go. I think she's the next one. But have you thought, since you probably spend who knows how many hours for research on each case, have you thought about offering an internship for criminology students to do research, as it would be great for their resumes?
Jessica?
We've actually had this conversation. Yeah, we probably should. Yes, that would be fun. In part because there's a lot of places we can't get to as easily. You know, I have a case in Santa Barbara that I've been needing to go get more stuff actually there. So it would be great to have someone to do it for. I really love researching, and I always research. I don't look at things or articles or anything like that are modern. I always go from the first thing I can find in the newspaper and try and follow it that way, so I can get kind of my own sense of what happened or the things I might want to talk about or bring up. And that's what I did for things like Stephen Stainer, which took many months to do. But yeah, the short answer, I guess they're asking me because I'm always like, no, I love that part. But yes, that would be great. Actually, that's a good idea.
My answer is 100%. Anybody in the room wants, I'm already behind like 4 episodes on research. I will take any of the help I can get. I like the writing more than the research, although I do like spending time in the library. So
I'm actually on my last semester to get my BA in history. And so I have a research paper I have to do that's 25 to 30 pages. And then I think if I'm going for my master's, it's 300 pages. So that'll be a lot of fun, but I'm getting used to it, learning how to research. And because of my school, I have a lot more of the tools right now, which is pretty nice, where I can get a lot of things accomplished. But yeah, I think the fun part though is we've done research. I've started doing research. Sometimes I'm working on one case and it changes because you go down these rabbit holes, and then you lay there in bed with your eyes open for 2 hours thinking about it, because it's like, what is going on? And then you have to go back and like, yeah, it's just hard. And like to just, sometimes it takes forever to like, and lately we've had our own, just life going on, and it's been harder to get episodes out because we've been doing research and having other things. But sometimes the research just keeps going and going. I think, right, Jessica, wasn't Steven Stainer a three-parter, and it turned into to 13?
Three to start
It
with.
was only 13 episodes. That's not.
Yeah, it was only 13, but I think it
13
was,
hours.
yeah.
But
I
we had to keep going back to the first episode and re-editing, because it would start it out as saying, oh, over the course of the next 3 episodes. And I think Sean had to go in and re-edit it 3 times.
Yeah,
We
just
had
because
no
it went
idea.
on, because you never know. Like you start finding new things and you have to go down the path. Sometimes, you're supposed to, like with recording music, sometimes you're supposed to say, this song is done. Just stop redoing it, stop adding to it. And sometimes it's hard with these cases because it's like, should this be left out or not? And then you start finding new things and you're like, you can't leave this out because it's important to the story. So yeah, a lot of times, sure, it would be nice to have just like a giant room full of just kids typing and saying, I found this. But at the same time, it is exciting to find the research that sometimes I get really excited when, I think something you find and no one else talked about it in all the other things that you've seen. I can't remember. There's been a couple times that I found this and I'm like, I find this very interesting that this never came back up, or it was never put in, and it's so part of a story. So yeah, I think just finding those diamond in the roughs during the research is really nice to have.
But if somebody is interested in that, shoot us an email. Why not?
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
do it.
Stop talking them out of research assistants.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You can
I'm
see
saying,
both sides.
yeah, I think I was saying was, come join us. It's so much.
Yeah.
All right, Ree, what was your question?
So I do definitely have a question. But before I say that, I want to say too, another thing that I love about you guys is your genuine responses, right? So if it's like Jessica's case, hearing Charles and Sean's authentic reactions to it, they're like, no way. Because like, I know you guys like script read and you proofread, but again, we go back to the Steven Stainer because I feel like I was on that journey with y'all. That was long. And guess what? I ate every minute of it because I grew up in that time. Like, again, milk cartons and stuff, right? Like I'm of that era, and that was scary for me as a kid. And so everybody, at least in my generation, knows about Steven Stainer. And so I was really excited to hear the facts, right? Because of course, as a kid, I didn't have them. And so hearing you guys, I picture you in my head. Okay, I see you in my eyes. Watching you guys like react to each other so authentically. It was like, I felt like I was part of the crew because all y'all didn't already know, right? And so I felt like you were learning along with me, and it makes me as a listener feel like part of the in crowd, if you will. So I just appreciate that. So that's just kind of letting all of our attendees who haven't heard you yet, the way you set it up draws people in. So my question, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, a lot of times, because we do go over to make sure we're not like saying something ridiculous, but a lot of those times, sometimes we leave something out a little bit, so we'll get like a really 100% authentic. But a lot of times that question that we had was because we were like, what is going on in the first place? So we still try to make it like, it's like the first time we hear it, even though we just proofread to make sure. But yeah, it's definitely, some of those things are shocking, and it comes through, I think.
Right, and you can't remember everything.
No, and that in the writing process too is like, we have had initial conversations about this is kind of what I'm researching, or here's the direction I'm going in, or here's some of the initial information. But I know for all 3 of us, sometimes we're rewriting up until the point where we're recording. So sometimes all of us have had those instances of it really is the first time you've seen that draft, and like Sean said, adding something extra or something new.
Yeah, I love it. So my question for you is, how do you, and each of you can answer, just you don't feel any pressure, but how do you keep your mental health under wraps, being so immersed in such awful facts all the time? And how do you practice your self-care? So I think it's really important to do that, which I'm sure you do, or you'd go crazy. So I was just wondering, how do you do it?
I can go first. Like I said, I did do the history of malls for a while, which didn't I do it every once in a while, but I'm kind of busy. I have daughters who are young. That's where, sorry, you got to see my nice grill picture, but I had to, when you brought up like kids missing, they're out there in the living room watching TV while my wife's gone. So I just wanted to go check on them because I heard some rustling in the kitchen. I didn't know if they were like swinging from the lights. So I just wanted to check on them. But I think a lot of things, like I go for walks, which sounds so dumb, like but I go for like really, and I'm super into gambling, like fantasy football or anything like that. So I go on walks, listen to podcasts about fantasy football. My friend and I, like, we're all into NFTs right now, and all we do is just talk about gambling. There's a casino by my house now, stuff like that. Also, I still have a band with, we're old and we still just make music, and then we just yell at each other, and we all have different political views, but we're all friends. So we scream and it's fun. And I think just, you have to step away from it, as like what the whole term of, don't bring your work home with you, even though you do, because you're sitting there and then you keep your eyes up all night thinking about it. But I think just having I'm obsessed with Twin Peaks. I'm on I watch it every year. I'm on my sixth time through, and it's more of like my soap opera. Like I feel like my grandma used to just sit there and have lotion on her hands constantly with like a blanket over her legs. And now I just have it on in the background, and I feel like that old woman, like putting on lotion while I watch Twin Peaks. So I think just keeping your mind off of it, but then knowing you have to do it. And, like you feel rewarded afterwards. Like you were talking about we didn't start the unsolved cases at first, or the missing persons. And we need to start doing this every week. And so throwing it in there to make you feel better. But yeah, you definitely have to figure out different outlets and just do other things, because you can't just do this. And once you do, if you're just researching for 3 days, you feel gross. And, and you're just a secondhand observer, and you must know how you can see how it actually happened to the families and everything like that, which makes it worse. So yeah, you definitely need self-care.
I'm trying to think. I don't know if I do anything in particular. I really like true crime and listen to a lot of other podcasts. So for me, in a way, being able to take a crime, we'll just mention Steven Sanger because we've been talking about that. And we were all really tired after that. And that was our first season, and we were just getting used to doing one episode at a time. And then I dragged both of these through, Sean and Charles, through 13 hours of it. But being able to talk about something you care about, we tried to include a lot of information about kids who suffer abuse and what they're going through. Or if we do an episode, I just did one recently where a husband killed a wife, and we got to talk about domestic violence. And that, in a way, for me, makes it doesn't help make it less terrible, but it makes you feel like you've done something important or good in that way. And so for me, that, I don't know, that helps me get through these episodes. Is the reason we're telling this story is to highlight a law or something we can change or something we can do in society. So that helps me.
Yeah, I kind of same. Is we all have our own little tricks. I mean, I know I'm kind of a giant nerd, so I read a lot of comic books and play Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, I'm going after this to go play Dungeons and Dragons with some friends. So that's the personal thing I do for self-care. Or Jess and I will, take walks or get out away from the research. But the act of writing and putting these episodes together, and when we see results or we get a good comment back, or like we have support like who has nice things to say, that is self-care. It's like, okay, all the stuff that we did through that, or talking to the chief of police from Seaside about the Annie Pham murder, and then coming and realizing, like, that he took his time to talk to us. That was cool. And we were talking about something terrible, but we did tried to do a little service of getting the word out. And then him calling us when they solved the case, and because he told us he'd call us, and that was super exciting that they. And so that is for us, it is kind of a self-care of, like, we're seeing the benefits of hard work. And so yeah, I guess that's kind of how we deal with it, or I deal with it.
Yeah, I guess I'm the only one with a gambling problem, but that's fine.
It's not a problem.
Yeah, with the fun stops here. I know the whole thing.
You're not gambling your rent away, so it's all right. All right, I just wanted to ask if any of our attendees have any questions. And we still do have time to have a quick chat about clemency if you guys still want to. We can always just come back to questions. So the reason I asked to talk about clemency is because I had noticed that was a new type of episode, and I thought it was super cool. And clemency is an interesting topic in general, right? And so when I started listening, I was like, ooh, something new. This is going to be fun, and it's not going to be too dour, for sure. And so I wanted to kind of open up the floor to see if you wanted to discuss just maybe a quick summary of what you learned about California clemency. And then we might have some other people on the line who will share what clemency is like where they live. So that's kind of the goal. So for Dr. Bashir students who maybe didn't know ahead of time, that's something, if you already know the clemency laws where you live, please chime in and share that with us, because that's one thing that we all thought would be cool to learn from. We're spread all over the world, just within this little Zoom chat right here. So go ahead, team, talk about your clemency summary real quick.
Well, we just kind of went over what clemency is in California. We talked about and defined pardons and commutations, and I think we talked mostly about medical reprieves. And this is something we didn't really know too much about. I mean, I knew what those words kind of meant, but I didn't know what it meant to actually try, if you were someone who had committed a crime and you wanted clemency, if you wanted a pardon or a commutation, how you went about that, how often those things are approved. And so for us, it was just really about, because I always kind of worry, we talk a lot about very terrible cases, and those are not really representative of the criminal justice system on the whole, of why the average person has gone to jail, or what that experience of, committing a crime, whether it's drugs or, an offense and trying to get your life together, what that's like. That's a whole different thing from what we normally cover. And I'm always afraid that if we don't cover those things, then people will think this is why everyone's in jail, and this is, and that they take that to the ballot box with them. And so it was just a really important thing for us to cover. It's also a really controversial thing in California. When Governor Newsom announced his latest pardons, there was a lot of backlash to it. So we just wanted to find out who these people were, why they were being pardoned or commuted, and just have a better understanding. And I think the three of us came away with a much more positive idea about what that process is like. It still doesn't probably go far enough to help enough people, but it's certainly not as controversial or as I don't know, they're not just letting murderers out kind of thing. So it was important for us to cover that, and I think we'll be covering some more policies as we keep going.
What I took away from the case was like what Jess was saying about the three different types: the medical reprieves, commutations, and then the pardon, and the process that someone has to go through to get the, it's almost like parole, but then also the distinction between, a lot of us, I think of pardon, and we talked about this in the episode, that it's the death row case, it's the governor calling at the last minute, it's this huge campaign, but the process before and after that, it was really kind of eye-opening, and how that went. And then what's happening currently in our state with our governor is that he's using that method to rectify problems that were done in the past. One of the guys that we highlight was a gentleman who immigrated from Germany right after he's a Holocaust survivor as a child, was arrested and prosecuted and sent to jail for I can't remember what the crime was, like lewd and lascivious acts, but it was targeted at the LGBTQ community. He was arrested, convicted, it's on his record. That affects his immigration status now. So he's lived with this since the 50s over his head, and the governor pardoned him. Doesn't say he's innocent of the crime. It's saying that, yeah, we made a mistake. So he's using the legal system to try to kind of rectify, like, yeah, you shouldn't have been arrested. That's a terrible crime. That's no longer on the books. Or it's not a terrible crime. It's no longer on the books. And we're going to use this means to help get you kind of get your life back. And so that was interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was very ignorant towards it, but I really wanted to just learn a lot more, because there's a lot of always social media chatter when anyone is just let out early, and they're just like, they're gonna burn down every big city, blah blah blah, and learning about when Jessica had a list of like all the governors and their who they actually pardoned and stuff, and some of them were like, they got caught with like the tiniest amount of like marijuana, and because it was a felony, they didn't even go to jail or anything. They were on probation, but they lost all their rights, and that was like so long ago. So things like that, and there was a lot of pardons like that, but all you hear about is Jerry Brown pardons 200 people. They don't actually put the list of what he pardoned for. So, and then people think that there's just a bunch of like violent criminals out. And I think just learning the process, because it seems like what we learned, it's a huge process. And the case that I'm working on is Joanne Parks, where her 3 children died in a house fire, and they convicted her with life without parole. And it's like this long process. And, she finally got out after 27 years, I think. And it was just hard, all the research and just finding it all out. But yeah, it's crazy how we only ever hear the last sentence of all these things that happen, when it's years and years of building up to why they were getting out in the first place. So it's very interesting in California.
Well said. I like how you said we only ever hear the last sentence. I think that's really, really succinct way to put it. And to be fair, even if I wanted to research, I probably don't have the research skills you guys have in finding the truth, right? I think that's a very particular set of skills. That was my Liam Neeson. But when it comes to just finding out what is really going on, right? It almost takes like half your life just to figure that out. So that's why I lean on you guys. So thank you for that. So, do we want to open up the floor to see if anyone wants to share what they know about Clemency, where they live? Or, I'm in Texas, so I think that's all, born and raised in California, but I live in Texas, and I think that's all I need to say about the Clemency here. No, I didn't feel like researching it. I know that they're so pro death penalty here. In general, I'm against death penalty because there are so many people who, like you guys are just talking about, just have the most ridiculous sentences for the most ridiculous crimes. And then there are some people that I'm like, that guy needs to be like shot on sight, right? For some of the people. So, I'm pretty wishy-washy when it comes to that.
I think this, between the 3 of us, this is a conversation we do have sometimes. So, it is a topic, definitely. And like, I remember like death penalty came up in California on the ballot, and like people are like, get it over with. It saves us more money, but it actually doesn't save the state more money. So, it's, people don't know what it actually, the process of it a lot of times. But yeah, it's not like you read an old case from 150 years ago where they convict him and then they, take him in the alley right then, like within 12 hours. And it's not that. So it is but yeah, we've definitely had some, I would say, heated heated conversations here and there about certain cases we've talked about.
Lively conversations.
Lively.
So I live in South Korea right now, and I did a little bit of research. It's very difficult, I have found, researching things in my community because a lot of the publications are either in Korean, and Google Translate and other apps that you can use don't ever get the point across the right way, translating from Korean to English. And I am absolutely the furthest thing from fluent. I know like 5 words. But there is something that has been in the news a lot lately, and that is that the president in August pardoned the heir of Samsung, the de facto leader of Samsung, which is a company that I know everyone is probably familiar with, from a huge corruption scandal. They did it, and I believe like it's pretty easy to see that the main motivation there is to help boost Samsung's impact on the economy in Korea, because it's everywhere. I mean, like there are apartment buildings that are Samsung, your refrigerator, your stove, your air conditioner, it's all Samsung here. And I think that they're just trying to, the economy here is, sort of teeter-tottering, and they pardoned him and are hoping that it'll have a positive boost on the economy. I also did a tiny bit of research into the death penalty in Korea, and it is still technically on the table, but no one has been executed since 1997. I was surprised to learn, though, that they were hanged. They're like, it seems like such an ancient method. I don't know, that really surprised me in the little bit of research that I was able to do.
Do you know if the guy from Samsung has he served any time? Was it, how long was he in prison at all?
So I would have to look.
Oh, you don't have to. I was
So-
just wondering if it was like more of like, because we've heard like, some people get pardoned way, and then we've seen like the weird things like the Stone, Roger Stone, like with Donald Trump, and how like he was pardoned really not getting any time. So
Right.
like, I'm just wondering if the Samsung guy did anything or he got it like kind of scot-free.
I see a lot of sort of media pictures of when they pardon people. I believe like a former president's wife was pardoned within the last year or so. And the pictures of her walking out of what appears to be some sort, either a courthouse or a facility, I don't know, but it's like, she's free now to walk the streets. But I don't know, so I don't want to say one way or the other. What I do know in Korea, from what research I've done that is mostly foreigner centric, is that if you are being, even though you're innocent until proven guilty here, you can be detained until the investigation is over. There is not really a bail situation where you like have to stick around and can't flee the country. No, you're under arrest. You're in a facility where they are constantly aware of your location. Oh, Bradley has a question.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that an interesting thing here in Australia is we don't have the death penalty in any of our states or territories, and we won't extradite anyone to a country if they're facing the death penalty. So if we get a fugitive from America, and I'm a former federal law enforcement officer, and I've extradited Australians to Little Rock, Arkansas, but if the crime over there that they're facing is the death penalty, we won't extradite. So I just thought that was an interesting topic to think about. And yeah.
Bradley, can I ask you a question? A follow up on that? Actually, I have 2 follow-ups, one for Erica and one for Bradley. So first off, for Bradley, if not that I'm planning a crime, but if I was, might run to Australia because it's a nice place. Would you detain them there indefinitely, or is it a matter of like how would that work?
Well, from my understanding, it would be, we obviously don't want to let them free, especially from a friendly nation like the United States, like an ally. You still want them to face justice. So you're negotiating to say that if you take death penalty off the table, you can have the person back. Because we don't want them in our jails either, because they take up space, it costs money, and they've got to face justice in their own country. But generally what would happen is they would then negotiate to take the death penalty off, and we'd hand them back.
That's awesome. Thank you. And then my follow-up for Erica would be, because one of the things that we talked a lot about when we were doing the clemency episode was that, and I think this is oftentimes gets left out, is that a pardon means you're guilty. So like you can't get a pardon unless you're actually pled guilty or been found guilty or something. So in Korea, is it the same as, does it have the same meaning as if you get pardoned, you do have to admit that you're guilty or are found guilty?
I can only answer as it pertains to this one person that I was researching, but they said that his criminal record from this particular scandal was wiped clean. So that's a big deal that disappears. And I'm not sure either what repercussions criminal records have here as far as voting rights. Firearms are not a thing. People don't have firearms in Korea, so that's not necessarily like a driving factor. But yeah, I don't know, but I know that this one particular executive's record was essentially deleted.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
both. It was interesting.
I think it's a pretty, again, unless it's like a vicious child murderer, I think there's a special death requirement for those people because I'm judgy, right? That's what we do as human. But I think it's really neat how Bradley was saying how they will negotiate, just don't kill them. And I find that to be interesting, just from a death penalty perspective. I'll just say that I had to research it for one of my legal studies classes. And when I found out, of course, there's disparity because we're America, right? And so I was kind of on the fence with death penalty, but after I did all the research, I'm definitely, as I said, in general, against it. And when I find out that people flee to countries where they know there's no extradition, I'm always thinking, does that country know that they have a criminal there? Do they just wait for them to commit another crime and then capture them and then try them in their country? Because it seems like if we as America go, hey, Mr. Deacon, Joe Blow committed a crime here and we want you to send him back. And unfortunately, he's going to a death penalty state. And you say, okay, but you're not allowed to execute him. And we say, okay, then it's kind of like the rights, if you will, that the people of that state voted for are now just being ignored. And then the people have to kind of decide, you know what I'm saying? Like, it seems like it gets into almost this black hole of craziness. And I understand, the different aspects of it, but I guess what I'm saying is it's all crazy in the end, because there are some states where the judge and jury, to include under military code of justice, a jury can say guilty, and then a judge can come back and say, nah, I'm going to reverse that. Because judges have the ultimate power. So it's almost like moot anyway, right? So it's just this huge kind of vortex of craziness that I spend a lot of time trying to understand. And I just feel stupid because I never really get it.
No, I think that's par for the course for any of this stuff. It seems like something that I won't say even on paper, but when you're talking about it, especially like around the water cooler or you're in a class or we're chatting about something, it seems like it should be straightforward. Person committed crime, this is the punishment. But then what we found in is like with the mitigating circumstances and, is like forgive me because I don't have my notes in front of me, but the California has, Jess and Sean, help me out. It's where they add something on to the
Special circumstances.
It's special circumstances around that and how that gets leveled. So it becomes this weird Gordian knot of like finding that truth. It's confusing. So I don't envy the people that have to make that decision. Although does make me want to find a case that involves extradition to Australia. And then we'd have to go to Australia for a research.
And you'd have the best tour guide in Bradley.
100%.
All right.
Go ahead.
Did you go ahead, Jessica?
Oh, no, go ahead.
So I would just wanted to be mindful of the time. We are at the hour mark. And so what I wanted to do was just do one last kind of announcement for Dr. Bashir's students. What she asked you to do is take a screenshot and then email her from your APUS Outlook for any credit that you want. And I wanted to take the time to thank our participants, but most importantly, thank our guests, Charles, Jessica, and Sean from California True Crime. I'm going to post all of your contact information again in the chat for anyone who came in after it was posted. And I'm just going to do a free plug for you guys. If you all, I'm assuming you're majoring in some form of criminal justice or law, I would imagine. If you're interested in true crime, whether you care about California or not, doesn't matter. It's a great podcast. If you happen to love California or be from there, like yours truly, one thing you will find in this podcast, if you weren't here in the beginning, is they do in-depth research of the city where the crime was committed. And sometimes there's more than one city. And I have not found anything like that on any other true crime podcast. And once again, I really appreciate you all giving your time. I know it's, like you said, you're about to go have fun with your boys. It's nice and early there. I'm sure you guys rushed home from work just to meet with us. And then of course we have our friends in Korea and Australia and wherever everyone else is. And you took the time out of your day or evening to spend with us here. So last plug for us, we have our very own Bradley Deacon coming up as a guest speaker soon as well. And I think Erica has a little more information on that than I do. But what I'm going to do once I shut up is try to find the link to our team up, unless Erica, you have it ready, because I wanted to share this with the Cali True Crime folks as well. If you want to join us when Bradley speaks, you won't want to miss.
Links and dates right now.
Okay, I mean, you heard him. He's amazing. He's a crime analyst. He's gonna have a show for us. I am excited, and so you are more than welcome to join back in whenever we have Bradley or anyone else speaking. Because once you're part of the family, you're part of the family, right? So through us, you're like the cousins of the APUS family. So you are welcome to join our criminology club meetings anytime. And that will be on that team up calendar. I think I haven't forgotten anything. Have I forgotten anything, Erica?
Not that I can think of. I'm just snagging that the date and time for our meeting. It's going to be in the same Zoom chat.
Yeah, it's always the same Zoom link. Do that to keep it easy. And so I just wanted to see if you guys had any kind of closing words before we close it out. For about 5 minutes over, so I want to respect people's time.
I just want to thank everyone for being here and the opportunity. Reed, this has been really fun. So we appreciate everyone. And yeah, if you haven't listened to us, listen to us. But huge thank you to Miss Brown, not only like supporting us and saying nice things, but inviting us. It's been really fun. And it's cool to see you in person. So that's been awesome.
We're so glad that you could join us. Guest speakers are always fun to have. We've had Judge as our guest speaker, and we're going to have Bradley on there. But as somebody who listens to crime podcasts in general, I was really excited when Reese suggested yours because I hadn't previously heard of you. But I'm always looking for something that has more than a couple of episodes that I can listen to. And now I have faces to put to voices.
Yeah, that's always the weird stuff, is once you actually see the faces that I always like, that's what they look like. But yeah, well, thank you for the invite. For future, I'm going to definitely try to do it as much as possible. And I know my kids really want to go to Denny's. That's what they suggested. And it's like, I don't want to go to Denny's, but they want to go to Denny's. So I'm going to have to get out of here. But thank you so much. Yes, very much. Thanks everyone.
I'll just say a quick thank you too. Means a lot to us to be able to talk to you guys. And if the person who asked that question does want to be an intern, please send us an email. We will work that out. That would be awesome.
Right. And if any questions that you'd had that you didn't want to ask on
Yeah.
here, definitely email us, because I know it can be intimidating sometimes when there's a bunch of boxes of faces. So if you want to just give us an email.
I have posted your website on our social media pages. We've shared your social media information in our chat on the actual Zoom. But before people start signing off and we forget, we need to take a screenshot, a photo.
Photo, yes. If you're here and you want to be in our photo, please turn it on. Thank you, Erica. Geez,
You're
I almost
welcome.
forgot again. And basically, I'm going to do 3, 2, 1. And whatever face you're making, that's going in the photo. So if you want to be silly, be my guest. And then I will take 2 photos. So you have until I say 3, 2, 1 to turn on your camera for the first photo. And then, hi, Raphael. Nice to see you there. And then, and then we'll do a second picture. Ready? 3, 2, 1. All right. And we'll get the second one ready. Cheese. 3, 2, 1. I saw you, Sean. That was fun. All right, everybody. Have a great night, day. Have fun gaming. Have fun at your rugby, Bradley. And we will see you next time.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks again.
All right, I'm ending the recording now.